More than 150,000 civilians in Sudan have died, both young and old. Millions have fled. Women have been violated. Homes and properties have turned to ashes. Families destroyed by bullets, and blood scattered across the streets, clearly seen even in satellite images from above. These are the scenes now surrounding Sudan, a country the whole world is talking about. But how did this chaos really begin? Who is responsible for these crimes? And in the middle of this conflict, what else can the United Nations and other countries do to stop another genocide? This is the story of a nation that once hoped for democracy, but fell deeper into the misery of war and death, the nation of Sudan. But before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's already a big help for us content creators. Thank you. To better understand how the civilians of Sudan ended up in this terrible situation, we need to go back to the years before the full outbreak of war. In the year 2019, Sudan woke up to hope. After 3 decades of Omar al-Bashir's rule, a rule ended by massive protests, many thought that the country was finally starting its journey toward democracy. Instead of holding elections, the civilians and the military decided to share power in a temporary government, a compromise that looked safe in words but was full of tension behind the curtain. And before long, in the year 2021, order collapsed again when a coup took place. This was when 2 names rose to prominence, the same 2 who would later become the center of the conflict: General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan from the Sudan Armed Forces, or SAF, and General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known by his alias Hemeti, the leader of the paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. 2 men who were once allies, but later turned against each other, driven by ambition to take control of the country. What they were fighting for was not just position. They were fighting for money, influence, and control over Sudan's valuable natural resources, especially its gold mines. At first, there was a plan to merge around 100,000 RSF fighters with about 200,000 members of the Sudan Armed Forces, but the question of who would lead became the start of their conflict. Both generals refused to lose their power and wealth, and because of that, they began building their own political influence and separate armies. The real explosion of violence happened on April 15, 2023, when the RSF deployed its forces to different strategic areas across Sudan. The SAF saw this as a threat. Clashes broke out immediately, and soon, intense fighting erupted in Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan. Because the RSF was faster and more skilled in urban warfare, they quickly captured several key facilities: broadcast stations, government buildings, and even parts of the presidential palace. The SAF retreated and launched airstrikes using their military helicopters from the Sudan Armed Forces. Within days, the capital was burning, and its streets were filled with the lifeless bodies of RSF fighters, SAF soldiers, and even innocent civilians. From May until the end of 2023, the war spread to the regions of Darfur and Kordofan. The dark memories of 2003 returned, reports of mass killings, gang rapes, and aerial bombings. And here, the fighting between SAF and RSF grew even more brutal. But who exactly are the RSF fighters, and how did this group begin? The RSF, or Rapid Support Forces, was formed in the year 2013. It came from a feared militia group called the Janjaweed, a force known for its brutal battles against rebels in Darfur, a region in western Sudan once torn apart by uprisings of rebel groups opposing the government. But despite their supposed mission, this group had long been accused of genocide and ethnic cleansing against non-Arab communities in the region, where thousands of civilians were killed and villages burned to the ground. Over the years, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, strengthened the RSF from its desert militia roots, turning it into an organized paramilitary force with its own weapons, war vehicles, and funding. The RSF also joined several foreign wars, such as in Yemen and Libya, working as paid soldiers or mercenaries. In time, General Hemeti also gained control of some of Sudan's largest gold mines. According to reports, this is where most of the RSF's money comes from. It's said that gold smuggling operations were being carried out toward other Middle Eastern countries where the gold was sold or exchanged for weapons. Because of this, the Sudan Armed Forces accused other countries of supplying weapons to the RSF in exchange for gold. In June 2025, the RSF achieved one of its biggest victories when it captured territory along the borders of Libya and Egypt, meaning they now controlled the supply routes for weapons, fuel, and trade from the north, a huge advantage in the war. Just a few months later, in October 2025, they completely seized El Fasher, the last major city in Darfur that was once held by SAF. At this point, almost the entire Darfur region and much of Kordofan were in RSF hands. In simple terms, if SAF controlled the east, RSF ruled the west. Meanwhile, the SAF, or Sudan Armed Forces, continued fighting on the other side of the country. They controlled the north and east, including Port Sudan on the Red Sea, which General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan declared as the temporary capital of Sudan. This city became the base of the United Nations-recognized government of Sudan. After enduring non-stop attacks and bombings, the SAF managed to retake the capital city, Khartoum, from the RSF. But what they found was a completely destroyed city. Government buildings, banks, and tall office towers were reduced to black ashes. Hospitals and clinics were devastated by airstrikes and artillery shelling. Some patients were even reported to have burned in their beds as buildings collapsed around them. Still, the SAF began rebuilding the city. Khartoum International Airport, once filled with wrecked airplanes, was reopened in October 2025 for domestic flights. But even that reopening was delayed by one day after a nearby area was hit by an RSF drone strike. On the other hand, the SAF also succeeded in recapturing almost the entire state of Gaza, one of the most important regions in central Sudan. In the year 2023, when the RSF took control of this region, hundreds of thousands of civilians fled from its main city, Wad Madani, a city that once served as a refuge for people escaping the war. The SAF's recapture of this region was one of their few victories in the middle of a bloody conflict. But despite that success, El Fasher, the last major city in Darfur held by the SAF, still fell. For months, the RSF surrounded it, cutting off food, electricity, and water supplies. Thousands of civilians were killed, and hospitals could no longer operate because of the number of wounded. In the end, the RSF even built a huge dirt wall around the city to completely trap the people inside and block the entry of food and aid. Not only that, they also destroyed the nearby Zamzam displacement camp, where thousands of hungry refugees were affected. Because of this chaos, Sudan is now clearly divided. In the east and north is Burhan's army, the SAF. In the west is General Hemeti's RSF. Between them lies a nation shattered, starving, and bleeding. As time goes on, the crisis gets even worse. Hundreds of thousands are dead, millions have fled, and entire cities have turned into ashes and graveyards. Satellite images showing burned villages and freshly dug graves prove that a systematic kind of violence is happening, something that can no longer be dismissed as simple fighting. According to data, more than 150,000 people have died in the ongoing war in Sudan. Based on the latest estimates from the United Nations and various human rights groups, in areas like Darfur and Kordofan, reports of mass killings, rape, and ethnic cleansing against the Masalit, Fur, and Zaghawa tribes are increasing, tribes considered non-Arab or black Sudanese. For many people in Darfur, it is clear that genocide is taking place. According to them, the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, and their allied militias are carrying out a systematic campaign to turn Darfur into an Arab-ruled territory. Towns that were once home to the Masalit are now nothing but ashes, and men, women, and children, young or old, are either being killed or forced out of their own land. In March 2024, UNICEF released a report about the horrific events in Darfur. According to it, armed RSF men have been violating women, even children. That same month, Human Rights Watch, or HRW, released one of the most comprehensive documentations of the violence in the region. According to HRW, thousands of civilians, mostly members of the Masalit and Fur tribes, were killed in the city of El Geneina, the capital of West Darfur. They called it a clear campaign of ethnic cleansing aimed at permanently removing or wiping out non-Arab residents. Based on satellite images collected by the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, more than 4,000 newly identified graves were found around El Geneina alone. Some areas that used to be villages have completely vanished from the map, leaving only ashes and bomb craters. Blood-stained lands could also be seen around houses, evidence of RSF mass killings in those places. HRW further said that the scale of the killings shows a clear intention to destroy, in whole or in part, the Masalit people. Because of this, the group called on the United Nations, the African Union, and international governments to conduct an investigation and officially recognize the violence as genocide. While the United Nations remains careful in using the term genocide, the United States did not hesitate. In January 2025, the U.S. State Department confirmed that the RSF and its allied militias are responsible for genocide in Darfur. According to then Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the RSF and its allies have been systematically killing men and boys, even infants, simply because of their ethnicity. He added that they also deliberately target women and children from specific groups to assault and harm them. Blinken further stated that the RSF blocks fleeing civilians and intentionally prevents food and aid from entering. This is clear evidence of genocide, Blinken said. Following this, Washington imposed sanctions against General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, the leader of the RSF, and later even against General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the head of the SAF, since his forces also killed civilians. The RSF, however, strongly denied these accusations. According to them, the ongoing clashes are merely part of tribal conflicts, but survivors' testimonies say otherwise. According to reports from UN investigators, while RSF fighters were assaulting non-Arab women, they would often shout racist insults and force the women to bear children from Arab men. They say, "We're making Arab babies, so your race will disappear." According to data from the UN Human Rights Office, around 65,000 non-Arab civilians in West Darfur alone were killed from April 2023 to October 2025. More than 60% of them were Masalit, including children and women. And as the crisis continues, aid groups warn that another massacre could happen in El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur, if the international community doesn't act quickly. It's estimated that about 250,000 civilians are still trapped there. Most of them come from non-Arab tribes and are currently under RSF control. The city almost has no food, medicine, or clean water left. Reports say that the RSF deliberately built huge dirt walls around the city to block supply trucks. From satellite images, you can also see that they are destroying the Zamzam displacement camp, where about 500,000 civilians live, mostly Masalit and Christians who have stayed there since fleeing the conflict. While Sudan continues to count its dead, the response from the global community remains cold. Peace talks led by Saudi Arabia and Bahrain have failed, and both sides repeatedly refuse a ceasefire. Experts say that both sides, especially the SAF, don't want to give up power, even if it costs the lives of thousands of civilians. Even the World Health Organization chief, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, expressed disappointment. There are more cameras focused on other wars. More aid is sent to other continents. But in Sudan, very few are watching. And I think the color of the people's skin has something to do with it. According to the World Food Programme, over 24 million Sudanese people, almost half of the country's population, are currently suffering from severe hunger. More than 12 million have fled to neighboring countries like Chad, Egypt, and South Sudan. In refugee camps, thousands of children die every month from hunger and dehydration. Over 1,100 feeding centers across Sudan have shut down due to lack of security. Aid volunteers say that RSF also targets relief convoys, robbing them or throwing grenades at them. As the chaos in Sudan continues, one thing is clear: their villages have become graveyards for certain ethnic groups. The Masalit, Fur, Zagawa, and other non-Arab Sudanese peoples are now almost wiped out in some parts of the region. From satellite images, you can see grave markings, large square patches of land that used to be farmlands and schools. While the world focuses on events in Israel, Gaza, the conflicts in Europe and America, and the issues between Taiwan and China, people ask, why is the world blind to the horrors happening in Sudan? The photos speak louder than any statement. A genocide is happening in Sudan, and the world is just watching, a bitter truth that no one wants to face.